He was known as the hardest man in the entire county, a farmer who hadn't smiled in 7 years and whose mere presence made even the bravest men lower their gaze. But when that woman arrived at the estate on a March afternoon, something that had been dead inside him began to stir, and on the day she finally crumbled and wept on his shoulder, Arthur Sterling understood that he had spent 7 years merely surviving, not living. Can you imagine carrying a pain so deep it turns your heart to stone? Can you imagine being terrified to feel again because the last time you loved, fate ripped everything away from you so brutally that you swore never to open that door again? But what if fate sent someone equally broken, someone who understood the language of silence and pain without needing words? This story took place in the rolling hills of Virginia at the turn of 1908, when the great estates still dictated the rhythm of life and wounded hearts hid behind hard labor and long silences. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you are watching this story from. Write down your city and state. I want to know how far these stories of true love are reaching. And if you are enjoying this, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any emotional stories. Now let's continue, because this story is going to touch your heart. Sterling Manor was nestled between undulating hills covered in wheat fields that looked like a green sea moving with the wind. The main house, built of stone and lime, imposing with its tall windows and wide porches, stood for over 50 years and held history within every wall. But in the last 7 years, that house had become quieter than a graveyard. The laughter that once echoed through the hallways had died along with Helen Sterling on a cold June night in 1901. Arthur was only 32 when he lost his wife. Helen was 28 and 8 months pregnant with their first child. Labor began at dawn, complicated from the very first moment. The midwife called for the doctor from the village, who rode 3 hours through a torrential downpour, but when he arrived, it was already too late. The child was stillborn, and Helen bled until she had no more life to give. Arthur held her hand until her last breath, felt the grip of her weak fingers fade, saw the light go out from those brown eyes that had been his joy for 6 years of marriage. They buried mother and son together in a single coffin in the small family cemetery on the estate beneath a century-old willow tree. Arthur didn't cry at the funeral. He didn't cry in the days that followed. He simply stopped feeling. Something inside him hardened, like clay dried in the sun. He continued working, managing the estate with ruthless efficiency, but the sternness that was once just strength of character transformed into something colder, more distant. The workers began to fear him. Arthur had never been a man of many smiles, but he used to be fair and even kind when necessary. After Helen, the kindness vanished. He demanded perfection, tolerated no mistakes, paid well, but expected every cent's worth of labor. His voice never needed to rise. His piercing gaze was enough to make anyone bow their head. Tall, with broad shoulders from carrying grain sacks since he was a boy, large calloused hands, black hair beginning to grey at the temples, Arthur Sterling at 39 was a figure that commanded immediate respect. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper who had worked on the estate for 30 years and had helped raise Arthur since he was a boy, was the only one who still dared to cross him now and then. She had witnessed his wedding to Helen, had seen true love bloom between those two, and now she watched the employer she loved, like a son, turn into a shadow of a man. On a March morning in 1908, Mrs. Gable entered the study where Arthur was reviewing the estate's ledgers. The sun was still low, but he had been awake for hours, as always. He slept little, worked too much, ate only what was necessary. He lived as if he were serving a sentence. Mrs. Gable cleared her throat lightly before speaking. "Mr. Sterling, we need to talk about the kitchen," she said with that firm voice of someone who knew his temperament. Martha gave notice. Her sister in Richmond was widowed and needs help with her shop. She leaves next week. Arthur didn't even lift his eyes from the ledger. "Then hire another," he replied with indifference. "You know how to do that without bothering me." Mrs. Gable crossed her arms. A gesture he knew well meant she wasn't going to give up easily. "I've already looked. The girls in the village either have commitments or are afraid to work here," she said bluntly. "You have a reputation as a difficult employer, in case you didn't know." Arthur finally raised his gaze, those dark eyes that seemed to see right through people. "I am fair. I pay well. If they are afraid of honest work, that's their problem." Mrs. Gable sighed. "It's not fear of the work, Arthur. It's fear of the silence in this house. It's fear of your manner. You've turned into stone, and people feel that." He turned his eyes back to the ledger, signaling the conversation was over. "Then find someone who isn't faint of heart. I need a cook, not a friend." It was exactly that afternoon that Amelia Brooks arrived in the village of Cedar Creek, a small settlement of 300 souls that served as a trading post for the region's farms. She stepped down from a merchant's wagon who had agreed to give her a ride from the city of Roanoke, a 3-day journey. She was covered in road dust, her simple grey cotton dress marked by the weather, a small cloth bundle containing everything she owned in the world. Amelia was 32, but suffering had marked her face in a way that made her look both older and younger. Older in the eyes, which carried deep sadness and the knowledge of pain. Younger in her skin, still smooth, in her dark brown hair tied in a simple bun, in her hands that, though calloused by work, still retained a delicacy. She was beautiful in a discreet way, the kind only those who really look notice. She didn't have the scandalous beauty that draws attention at parties, but the quiet beauty of a dawn, of a wildflower, of something natural and true. She thanked the merchant for the ride and stood in the town square looking around. The small church with white walls, a few shops, Mr. Campbell's general store, the parsonage. It wasn't much different from the village where she had grown up in the Shenandoah Valley before the flood 2 months ago took everything away. Amelia had lost her husband Jacob 3 years prior in a collapse at the quarry where he worked. The marriage had been arranged by their families when she was just 18, and Jacob, though an adequate provider, was a controlling man with a difficult temper. She learned to walk in silence, not to contradict him, to keep the house spotless and the food always ready. When he died, Amelia felt relief mixed with guilt for feeling relief. She went back to live with her younger sister Lucinda, who had 2 small children and a husband who worked in another quarry. Then came the flood. The river rose violently after a week of non-stop rain. The water took houses, crops, lives. Lucinda and her family managed to escape in time, but they lost everything. They decided to go to Pennsylvania to try a new life with distant relatives. Amelia didn't want to go. She didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to depend on the charity of people she barely knew. She decided it was time to start over alone, in another place, where no one knew her history. She had heard of Cedar Creek from a drover who passed through the flooded region offering help. He said it was a quiet village, with large estates that always needed help, especially women for housework. Amelia was an excellent cook. She had learned from her mother, who had been a cook for a wealthy family before marrying. She knew how to make everything from simple, everyday meals to elaborate dishes for special occasions. She had a good hand for bread, sweets, preserves. If there was one thing she could trust, it was her talent in the kitchen. She walked to Mr. Campbell's general store, a small establishment that sold a little of everything, from fabrics to tools, flour to gunpowder. The owner, a paunchy man of about 50 with a thick moustache, was behind the counter rolling tobacco. "Good afternoon," Amelia said with a calm voice. "I am looking for work as a cook. Would you happen to know if any farm in the region is in need?" Mr. Campbell looked her up and down with curiosity, but not malice. "You're not from around here, are you? Where do you hail from?" "From the valley. I lost everything in the flood. I'm starting over," she explained without going into details. "I'm a good cook. I work hard. I don't cause trouble." The merchant scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Well, there's Sterling Manor. They always need people. It's the biggest estate in the region, owned by Mr. Arthur Sterling. Pays well, but the boss is a difficult man. Widower for about 7 years, became very stern after he lost his wife. Doesn't mistreat anyone, but he ain't easy either." Amelia nodded. "I don't need easy. I need honest work and a place to stay." Mr. Campbell seemed to like the answer. "Then head up there. It's about 3 miles from here, the road that goes up the hill. Ask for Mrs. Gable. She's the housekeeper. Tell her Mr. Campbell from the store sent you." Amelia thanked him and followed the indicated road. The sun was already beginning to set when she sighted Sterling Manor. The big house rose imposingly at the top of a gentle elevation, surrounded by endless fields. A well-maintained wooden gate, a wide dirt courtyard, large barns for grain storage, workers' cottages, stables, pig pens, chicken coops. It was a large operation, prosperity evident. She rang the bell at the gate. A young boy, likely a worker's son, appeared and asked what she wanted. Amelia explained she came to look for work as a cook and asked to speak with Mrs. Gable. The boy led her to the back of the main house, where the spacious kitchen was located, featuring a huge wood-burning stove, a long work table, and shelves full of iron and copper pots. Mrs. Gable was supervising Martha, the cook who was still there, in the preparation of dinner. She was a robust woman of about 60, grey hair tied in a tight bun, sharp eyes that missed no detail. When she saw Amelia standing at the door, she straightened her posture. "What can I do for you, miss?" Amelia repeated her request, mentioning that Mr. Campbell from the store had sent her. Mrs. Gable observed her carefully, noticing the upright posture despite the evident fatigue, the calloused hands of a worker, the calm and respectful way of speaking. "Do you have experience?" "Where are you from?" Amelia told her briefly, without dramatizing. She spoke of her mother, who had been a cook, how she learned as a girl, the work she did to supplement income when her husband was alive. She didn't mention that the marriage had been difficult, didn't mention the guilty relief she felt upon becoming a widow. She kept only to the necessary facts. Mrs. Gable listened to everything attentively. "Can you make bread, sweets, food for many people?" "I can do everything. Bread, corn cake, biscuits, fruit preserves, hearty meals and fine dining. My mother cooked for a wealthy family in Roanoke. She taught me everything." The housekeeper seemed satisfied. "The work here is heavy. The master eats lunch at noon sharp, dinner at 7 in the evening sharp, breakfast at 6. He tolerates no lateness, tolerates no mistakes. Pays $60 a month, room and board included. The room is small but clean, at the back of the house. Interested?" $60 was a good wage, above average. Amelia nodded. "Interested, yes, ma'am." "Then you start tomorrow. Martha stays until the end of the week to teach you the routine and the master's tastes. He is a man of few words, but when he speaks, you listen and obey. He isn't one to mistreat anyone, but he also has no patience for laziness or sloppiness. Understood?" "Understood," Amelia said firmly. Mrs. Gable showed her the simple room at the back of the house next to the pantry. It really was small, just a narrow bed, an old dresser, a chair, a small window looking out back. But it was clean, the mattress was firm, there were washed sheets. For someone who had slept in a wagon for the last few nights, it was a palace. Amelia dropped her bundle on the dresser and returned to the kitchen. Mrs. Gable had already informed Martha about the new cook, and the woman, around 40 with a practical manner, immediately began explaining the routine. She spoke of the rigid schedules, the master's tastes, how he liked his coffee strong, the bread always fresh, the stew seasoned but not spicy, the meat well done. She also said he ate little in silence and never gave compliments. If the food was good, he simply ate. If it was bad, he simply didn't eat, and you knew you had failed. "And does he come into the kitchen?" Amelia asked while helping to chop onions for dinner. Martha shook her head. "Never. He eats in the dining room alone. I take the food, serve it, and leave. He doesn't like conversation during meals. Actually, he doesn't like conversation, period." Amelia absorbed everything in silence. She was used to men with difficult temperaments. Jacob had been like that, though in a different way. Jacob was explosive, shouted, broke things when contradicted. This Arthur Sterling seemed to be the type of cold, silent severity, which in a way was worse because you never knew what he was thinking. Dinner that night was served promptly at 7. Amelia watched from a distance as Martha carried the tray with roast beef, potatoes, and greens to the dining room. She returned 15 minutes later, the tray with empty plates. "He ate everything," Martha said simply. "He's in a good mood, or the closest he gets to it." Amelia slept heavily that first night, exhausted from the journey, but woke before dawn with the roosters crowing. She got up, washed her face in the basin with cold water, pinned her hair in a bun, and put on the other dress she owned, this one of faded blue cotton. When she reached the kitchen, the fire was already lit, and Martha was starting to prepare breakfast. "Today you watch, tomorrow you do," Martha said. The following days were intense learning. Amelia absorbed everything like a sponge, memorizing every detail of the routine, every preference, every kitchen trick. She had a good hand and learned fast, and Martha noticed. "You'll do well here," the older woman said on her last day. "Just don't take the master's coldness to heart. He isn't a bad person, just a man who suffered too much and forgot how to be human." On the 7th day, Martha left, and Amelia took over the kitchen completely. It was then that she saw Arthur Sterling for the first time. It was Saturday morning. She was preparing coffee when she heard firm footsteps in the hallway. She turned, and he was standing at the kitchen entrance, large, imposing, watching her with those dark eyes that seemed to evaluate everything. "You are the new cook," he said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. "Yes, sir." "Amelia Brooks," she replied, holding his gaze, something few people did with him. Arthur seemed to notice that. Most lowered their eyes immediately. This woman looked at him calmly, without challenge, but also without fear. There was something about her, in her upright posture, in her quiet manner, that sparked his curiosity against his will. "Mrs. Gable says you are competent. I hope it's true. I don't tolerate waste, and I don't tolerate sloppiness," he said with a grave, firm voice. "You won't have cause to complain, sir," Amelia replied simply. He nodded once and withdrew. Amelia let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. So that was him. The stern widower, the farmer with a heart of stone. She had seen much sadness disguised as severity in those eyes, but it wasn't her problem. She was there to work, not to understand complicated employers. The first days were a silent adjustment. Amelia woke at 5 in the morning, lit the fire, brewed the strong coffee as he liked, put the bread in to bake. Arthur came down at 6 sharp, drank coffee alone in the dining room, and went out to inspect the work in the fields. He returned at noon, ate lunch in silence, rested for an hour, and went back to work until nightfall. He dined at 7, read correspondence in his study until 9, and went up to his room. Rigid, predictable, lonely routine. Amelia kept the kitchen spotless, the food always punctual and well-made. Arthur never commented on anything, but the plates returned clean. She interpreted this as approval. Mrs. Gable confirmed it. "If it wasn't good, you'd know by now," the housekeeper said. But something began to happen, without either of them realizing it at first. Arthur started paying attention to small details. The smell of cinnamon in the air when Amelia made apple cake. The careful way she arranged wildflowers in a jar in the living room. The soft sound of her voice when she talked to Mrs. Gable. the kitchen light on late at night when she was preparing caramel for the next morning's breakfast, and Amelia, for her part, began to observe him too. She noticed that he always ate less on Sundays. She noticed that he avoided passing through the hallway where there was a framed portrait of a pretty woman with light hair, certainly Helen. She noticed that he worked until exhaustion, as if he were running from something. She noticed that he never received visitors, never went to village parties, lived in self-imposed isolation. A month after Amelia's arrival, the first real conversation between them happened. It was late at night. Amelia was in the kitchen preparing shortbread for the next morning when Arthur entered. She startled slightly. She didn't expect to see him at that hour. He would normally be in his study or his room. "Sorry to intrude. I came to get water," he said, an unusual gesture. There was a pitcher of water always available in the dining room. "It's no intrusion, sir. Let me get it," Amelia offered, wiping her hands on her apron. But Arthur had already served himself. He stood there, holding the glass, watching her work. "Do you do this every night? Stay up late preparing things?" "Depends on what needs doing. Shortbread is better if the dough rests all night before baking," she explained simply, without stopping her work. He drank the water in silence. "You cook well, better than Martha," he said suddenly. Amelia raised her eyes, surprised. It was the first time he had commented on something positive. "Thank you, sir. Where did you say you came from again?" he asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. "The Shenandoah Valley. I lost everything in the February flood. I came to start over here," she said, keeping her tone neutral. Arthur nodded slowly. "Starting over is hard." "It is, but sometimes it's necessary," she replied, and there was something in the way she said it that made Arthur look at her more closely. "You are a widow," he said, and again it wasn't a question. Mrs. Gable had told him, "for 3 years." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who knew intimately the weight of loss and didn't need to pretend they didn't. He set the glass on the sink. "Good night," Arthur said, and left. Amelia stood still for a long moment, hands still in the cookie dough. Something had changed in that brief conversation. A tiny crack in the wall both maintained around themselves. The following days brought more small changes. Arthur began appearing in the kitchen occasionally, always with some excuse, to get water, to ask about dinner, to advise that the lawyer would be visiting and he would need lunch for 2. But Amelia noticed he lingered a little longer than necessary, watched her work, sometimes asked a casual question about some dish. And she, who had learned to read silences in her difficult marriage with Jacob, realized that Arthur was lonely in a way that went beyond widowhood. He had isolated himself so completely that he had forgotten how to connect with another human being. One afternoon in April, weeks after Amelia's arrival, something happened that forced a greater proximity between them. A violent storm fell upon the region without warning, the kind that appears quickly in the hills. Arthur was in the farthest fields when the downpour began. He returned soaked to the bone, shivering with cold, but stubbornly trying to continue working. Mrs. Gable intercepted him on the porch. "Arthur Sterling, you are going to take a hot bath and change those clothes right now, or I'll drag you by the ear myself like I did when you were 10, she said, with maternal severity. He grumbled, but obeyed. When he came down an hour later, in dry clothes but still shivering slightly, Amelia had already prepared hot chicken soup and ginger tea with honey. She put everything on a tray and took it to the dining room, where he was sitting near the fireplace Mrs. Gable had lit. "You need to eat something hot," Amelia said, placing the tray on the table. "Chicken soup is good for drawing the cold out." Arthur looked at the steaming bowl, then at her. "You didn't need to go to the trouble." "It's not trouble, it's my job," she replied, but there was true kindness in the way she said it, not just obligation. He began to eat. The soup was perfect, The broth rich, the chicken tender, the seasoning just right. The warmth traveled down his body like liquid comfort. "Sit a spell," he said suddenly, indicating the nearby chair. "I don't like eating with folks standing around watching." Amelia hesitated but obeyed. She sat on the edge of the chair, hands crossed in her lap. The fire crackled in the fireplace. The rain drummed on the windows. The large room, usually cold and silent, seemed almost cozy in that moment. "This storm reminds me of that night," Arthur said suddenly, his voice low. "The night Helen died. It rained like this, torrential. The doctor almost couldn't make it in time, not that it would have made a difference." Amelia stayed quiet, just listening. She didn't offer empty words of comfort, didn't say it was God's will, or that he had to move on. She just listened. He continued, the words coming out as if they had been dammed up for too long. She was so excited about the baby. She had embroidered diapers, made little clothes, prepared the nursery. She had so many plans. And in one night, it all ended. She was gone, the baby was gone, and I was left here not understanding why. "I am so sorry," Amelia said simply, and there was absolute truth in those 4 words. Arthur looked at her. "And you? How was it losing your husband?" Amelia chose her words carefully. "My marriage wasn't like yours. Jacob was a good provider, but he was a difficult man. When he died, I felt relief, and then I felt guilt for feeling relief. It's not the same thing you felt." "But it's loss all the same," Arthur said, and there was understanding without judgment in his voice. "It is. It's loss all the same." They sat there while the storm roared outside, 2 survivors of different shipwrecks finding momentary dry land in each other's silent company. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something, a fragile connection beginning to form between 2 people who had forgotten how to connect. When the rain finally lessened and Amelia stood to return to the kitchen, Arthur said something that surprised her. "Thank you. Not just for the soup, for listening." She nodded and left, her heart beating strangely in her chest. Something was changing, and she didn't know if she should feel fear or hope. The days that followed brought subtle but noticeable changes. Arthur didn't return to being the closed-off man from before. He didn't miraculously transform into a cheerful and expansive person, but the conversations in the kitchen became more frequent. He began to eat breakfast a little slower, sometimes commenting on the weather, the work, asking questions about the recipes she prepared. And Amelia discovered she liked those moments. She liked the way he really listened when she spoke, as if her words mattered. She liked how he never treated her as inferior for being help, but with genuine respect. She liked observing small details about him, like the way he ran his hand through his hair when he was thinking, how his eyes softened slightly when he tasted something particularly good, how his large, strong hands handled the coffee cup with unexpected care. But then, on a late April afternoon, the wagon arrived with the news that would destroy the fragile balance Amelia was building. A messenger brought a letter from her sister Lucinda. Amelia read the words once, twice, 3 times, trying to make sense of them. Lucinda had died, typhoid fever, fast and brutal. In 10 days, she was dead. Her husband, devastated, had sent the 2 small children to an orphanage in Pennsylvania, unable to care for them alone. The letter was from him, brief and desperate, asking Amelia to go get the children if she could, if she wanted to, because he couldn't be a father without their mother. Amelia finished reading the letter in the empty kitchen. Her hands trembled, holding the paper. Lucinda, her baby sister, the only family she had left, the girl she had helped raise when their mother died. Dead, and she hadn't even been there, hadn't even been able to say goodbye. The pain came like a giant wave, breaking all the defenses she had built. Amelia sat on the wooden bench near the stove and began to weep. It wasn't delicate, silent crying. It was weeping of deep pain, of accumulated loss, of exhaustion from carrying too much weight for too long. She cried for her sister, for her mother who had died years ago, for the unhappy marriage she had endured, for the flood that took everything, for the loneliness of starting over alone with no one in the world. That was how Arthur found her. He had come to get water, the usual excuse, and stopped in the doorway seeing her there, doubled over, shoulders shaking with sobs. For an instant he froze, unsure of what to do. 7 years without allowing emotional proximity to anyone, 7 years running from any feeling. But then he saw the crumpled letter on the floor near her, understood it was bad news, and something inside him, something that had been dead since that rainy night in June of 1901, moved. Arthur crossed the kitchen, knelt beside her, and did something he hadn't done for 7 long years. He opened his arms and offered comfort. "Amelia, what happened?" he asked with a soft voice. She lifted her tear-stained face, tried to speak but couldn't. She simply collapsed against his chest, and Arthur pulled her closer, holding her while she cried. Strong arms around her, a large hand stroking her hair in a clumsy but sincere way, the steady heartbeat under her ear. She cried for minutes that seemed like hours, releasing years of accumulated pain. And Arthur held her through all that time, without rushing, without discomfort, just there, firm and present. He realized it was the first time since Helen that he allowed this kind of intimacy, this kind of shared vulnerability. And more than that, he realized he wanted to be there. He wanted to hold this woman who had brought silent light to his empty house. He wanted to protect her from whatever pain she was feeling. When the sobs finally subsided, Amelia pulled away slightly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, sir, I shouldn't have—" Arthur interrupted her. "Don't apologize to me. Tell me what happened." She picked up the letter from the floor with hands still trembling and handed it to him. Arthur read quickly, his face closing with understanding and compassion. "Your sister. I am so sorry, Amelia. Truly sorry." "She was all I had," whispered Amelia, "the only family remaining. And I wasn't even there when she needed me. It wasn't your fault. You had no way of knowing," he said firmly. He took her hands in his, an intimate and natural gesture. "What are you going to do now?" Amelia wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "I need to go get the children. I can't leave my niece and nephew in an orphanage. But I don't have the money for the trip. I don't have a house to take them to. I have nothing. I don't know what to do." Arthur was silent for a moment, thinking. Then he made a decision that surprised even himself. "I will pay for your trip, and when you return with the children, they live here. You continue working and they stay here on the estate. There is a school in the village. There is space here. We'll make it work." Amelia looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir, I cannot accept that. It's too much." "It is not too much." "It is the right thing," he said, with that natural authority that admitted no argument. But this time the authority was tempered with kindness. "You work well, you are a good person, and I won't leave you and the children helpless. It is decided." Tears returned to Amelia's eyes, but now they were tears of gratitude, mixed with something else. She looked at that man everyone called stern and cold, and saw deep kindness he hid behind walls. "Thank you," she whispered. "Truly, thank you." Arthur helped her stand, and for a moment they stood there, too close to be casual, looking into each other's eyes. There was something in the air between them, something new and frightening and promising, but neither was ready to name it yet. "You leave tomorrow morning. I'll arrange the wagon ride to the nearest train station," he said, returning to a practical tone, but not completely letting go of her hands. Amelia nodded, still processing the unexpected generosity, the monumental shift that had happened in that kitchen. She had wept on the shoulder of the sternest farmer in the region, and he had held her with a gentleness no one imagined existed inside him. And Arthur, for his part, realized as he organized the details of her trip in his mind that for the first time in 7 years he didn't want to be alone. He wanted her to come back. He wanted to see her in the kitchen, wanted to hear her voice, wanted those small moments of conversation that had become the best part of his days. Something had started between them in that embrace. Something both had thought dead forever was slowly being reborn, fragile but persistent like a green sprout pushing through stones. Amelia left the next morning, before the sun fully rose. Arthur had arranged the wagon to the train station in Charlottesville, a 3-day journey to Pennsylvania, and enough money for return tickets with the 2 children. He handed her an envelope with more money than necessary, insisting she keep it for emergencies. "Take care," he said when the wagon was ready to leave, "and come back soon." There was something in the way he said those last words that made Amelia's heart race. It wasn't just an employer worried about a cook. It was something more personal, deeper. She nodded, holding his gaze for a long moment before climbing into the wagon. Arthur stood in the courtyard, watching the wagon go down the road until it disappeared between the hills. The estate suddenly seemed emptier than it had been in years. He went back inside the big house, and the silence that was once familiar now weighed differently. It was a specific absence, not just general loneliness. Mrs. Gable took over the kitchen temporarily, but the food didn't taste the same. Not because Mrs. Gable cooked poorly, she was an excellent cook. But something intangible that Amelia brought was missing. The extra cinnamon in the cake, the care with the crust of the bread, the jar of fresh flowers on the table, small details Arthur hadn't even consciously noticed until they were no longer there. The days dragged on. Arthur found himself looking down the road whenever he passed near the house. He worked even harder than usual, trying to fill the empty hours. But at night, when he sat alone to dine, he missed those stolen moments in the kitchen, the brief conversations, the sound of her voice explaining some recipe, the way she smiled slightly when he complimented the food, genuinely surprised, as if not used to praise. Reverend Thomas came to visit in the second week of Amelia's absence. The Reverend was a tall, thin man of about 55, grey hair, kind eyes that saw more than most. He had been friends with Arthur's father and had married Arthur and Helen years ago. He was one of the few Arthur still tolerated as company. They sat on the porch with coffee Mrs. Gable had prepared. The Reverend observed Arthur closely while they talked about trivial matters, the harvest, the weather, news from the village. "You are different," Reverend Thomas said suddenly. Arthur furrowed his brow. "Different how?" "Less absent, more present, as if you've returned to inhabit your own life," explained the priest with that quiet wisdom he possessed. "Does this have to do with the young woman who works here? Mrs. Gable mentioned her." Arthur tensed immediately. "She went to get her orphaned niece and nephew in Pennsylvania. She returns next week." "That's not what I asked," said the Reverend with a half-smile. Arthur remained silent, staring at the coffee in his cup. "I don't know what you want me to say, Reverend. I don't want you to say anything. I just want you to know there is no betrayal in continuing to live. Helen wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life trapped in a pain that won't bring her back." Thomas spoke with firm kindness. "I know that," Arthur replied, but his voice came out less convinced than he intended. "Knowing and accepting are different things, my son. You built a prison around your heart and called it loyalty. But true loyalty to the memory of those we love is to live fully, not just survive." The words stayed with Arthur after the Reverend left. He went up to the small estate cemetery that afternoon, something he rarely did because it hurt too much. He stood before Helen's grave, the simple stone marker with her name and dates marking a life too short. Arthur knelt on the overgrown grass. "I don't know what I'm doing, Helen," he said in a low voice. "I spent 7 years alone because I couldn't imagine feeling anything for another person. And now there's this woman. And I didn't plan this, didn't want this, but it's happening. I don't know if it's right, I don't know if you would understand." The wind blew softly through the trees, making the leaves of the willow whisper. It wasn't an answer. Arthur knew that. But somehow it brought a peace he didn't expect. Helen had been a generous and loving woman. She wouldn't want him to wither in loneliness for the rest of his life. She would want him to be happy. He returned to the house with a lighter chest, as if he had received permission he didn't know he was seeking. Amelia returned 11 days after she had left, on a sunny Friday afternoon. Arthur was in his study when he heard the sound of a wagon arriving. His heart raced in a way that caught him completely off guard. He forced himself to wait a few minutes before going out, trying to look casual, but when he finally went to the courtyard, he couldn't completely hide the relief on his face. Amelia was stepping down from the wagon, and behind her came 2 children. A boy of about 7, dark hair and large, frightened eyes, holding the hand of a smaller girl, maybe 5 years old, with undone braids and a worn dress. Both looked exhausted and lost. Arthur approached. Amelia turned and their eyes met, and something passed between them in that moment, a mutual recognition that the absence had been hard for both. "Mr. Sterling, these are my niece and nephew, Richard and Catherine," Amelia introduced with a soft voice, placing her hands on the children's shoulders. "Children, say hello to the gentleman who is welcoming us." The children gave awkward nods, clearly intimidated by Arthur's imposing figure. He lowered himself to their level, a gesture that surprised Amelia. "Welcome to Sterling Manor," he said with a voice softer than he usually used. "You must be tired from the journey. Let's get you settled nicely." Mrs. Gable had already prepared a small room next to Amelia's, with 2 narrow beds and clean sheets. The children entered timidly, still processing all the changes in their short lives. Within weeks, they had lost their mother, been taken to an orphanage, and were now in an unknown place with an aunt they barely knew. Amelia helped them settle in, talking softly, reassuring them. Arthur watched from a distance, something squeezing in his chest. 7 years ago, he had expected to have children, had dreamed of seeing children running through the halls of the big house. That dream had died with Helen and the baby. Seeing these children here now brought pain, but also a strange sense of possibility. That night, after the children slept exhausted, Amelia returned to the kitchen to prepare something for the next day. Arthur appeared, as if he had never stopped appearing. "How was the trip?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. Amelia sighed. "Difficult." The children were terrified at the orphanage. Richard didn't say a word for the first 2 days. "Catherine cried every night asking for her mother," she recounted while kneading dough for bread. "But slowly they are starting to trust me. It will take time." "And you? How are you?" asked Arthur, and the way he asked with genuine concern made Amelia stop working and look at him. "I'm holding firm because I need to be strong for them. But inside it still hurts a lot," she admitted. "My sister was only 3 years younger than me. I took care of her when our mother died. She was like my daughter in some ways." Arthur crossed the kitchen and stood on the other side of the work table. "You don't need to pretend everything is fine with me. We're past that point." Amelia smiled sadly. "We are, aren't we? I've barely known you 2 months, and I feel you might understand things even I don't understand properly." "Maybe because we both know the same kind of pain," said Arthur. "And Amelia, stop calling me Sir or Mr. Sterling when we are alone. Call me Arthur." It was an intimate request, a breaking of the social barrier between employer and employee. Amelia felt the weight of it. "I don't know if that would be proper," she hesitated. "I don't care about proper. I care about real," he replied. And there was intensity in his gaze that made her stomach flip. If you enjoy making this story even more emotional, leave a comment below and share with someone who also loves stories of true love. Amelia nodded slowly. "All right. Arthur, then." He smiled, and it was a small but genuine smile, the first time she had seen him smile for real. It transformed his face completely, softened the hard lines, lit up his dark eyes. "Much better," he said. The following days brought a new dynamic to the farm. The children began to adapt slowly. Richard, shy and observant, liked to stay near Amelia in the kitchen, helping with simple tasks. Catherine, more extroverted despite the sadness, was fascinated by the chickens in the yard and the orange cat that lived in the stables. Arthur, surprisingly, demonstrated unexpected patience with them. He taught Richard the proper knot for farm work. He took Catherine to see the newborn calves. He wasn't demonstrative with affection, maintained a certain reserve, but the children sensed the fundamental kindness beneath the severity and began to trust him. And Amelia observed all this with an increasingly complicated heart. She saw the kindness Arthur hid from the world, saw how he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, felt the electric tension when their hands touched accidentally passing something. She was falling in love, and that terrified her. Her marriage to Jacob had taught her that men could be cruel, controlling, diminish you until nothing was left. She had sworn never to put herself in that position again. But Arthur was different. He saw her as an equal, respected her opinions, valued her work. When he looked at her, he saw a complete person, not a possession. One night in May, 2 months after Amelia's return, one of those moments happened that both would treasure. It was a cool night, the starry sky immense. Arthur was on the porch smoking a rolled cigarette, looking at the stars. Amelia went out to pick fresh herbs from the small garden she had planted out back and saw him there. "May I keep you company?" she asked hesitantly. "Please," he replied, indicating the bench next to his. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just observing the night. Then Arthur spoke. "Do you know what I miss most? It's not just Helen. It's the feeling of having someone to share things with, someone to tell about the day, to make plans, to simply exist together. Loneliness isn't just being alone. It's having no one who cares if you are there or not." Amelia understood perfectly. "I know exactly what you mean. Even when Jacob was alive, I felt lonely. He was there physically but never really present. And now, even with the children, there is a part of me that misses having someone, an adult. Someone who understands the complicated things children don't understand yet." Arthur turned his head to look at her. The weak light of the lamp coming from the window illuminated half his face, leaving the other half in shadow. "Do you feel lonely here?" Amelia met his gaze. "I did, but I don't anymore, not when you're around." The air between them became charged. Arthur extended his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Amelia didn't pull away. She placed her hand in his, and their fingers interlaced as if they had always been made for that. "Amelia," he began with a raspy voice, "I don't know how to do this. I spent 7 years convinced I would never feel anything for anyone again. And then you showed up and turned everything upside down. I don't know if I'm doing this right, if it's too soon, if—" She squeezed his hand, interrupting. "I don't know either. I'm scared too. But I know I like being near you. I know you make me feel safe in a way I've never felt before. That has to mean something." Arthur pulled her closer until their shoulders touched. They stayed like that for a long time, hands held, shoulders touching, looking at the stars. They didn't kiss, didn't say words of love, but they didn't need to. There was a promise in that shared silence. There was a future beginning to take shape. When they finally separated to sleep, both went up to their rooms with lighter hearts, with hope they hadn't felt in years. The following days were filled with stolen moments, glances that lasted seconds too long, fingers that brushed when passing the salt at the table, small shared smiles when no one else was looking. Arthur began finding excuses to be near her, came to the kitchen to check if anything was needed from the store, offered to help carry firewood, asked her opinion on farm decisions he would normally make alone, and Amelia bloomed under that attention. She began wearing her best dress on Sundays, let her hair down at night when she knew he was still awake, prepared his favorite dishes with increased frequency, hummed while she worked, a soft sound that filled the house with life that had been missing for too long. Mrs. Gable observed everything with silent approval. Initially, she had worried, loyalty to Helen's memory making her question if it was right for Arthur to be interested in another woman. But seeing the employer she loved like a son slowly reborn, seeing light return to his eyes, she understood there was no betrayal in this. There was only life continuing, as it should. The children also noticed the change. Richard commented to Amelia one morning, "Auntie, Mr. Arthur smiles more now. Is it because he's happy we're here?" Amelia combed her niece's hair, tying the braids. "I think he's happy for many reasons, my love. But yes, I think having new people in the house is doing him good." "He likes you," declared Catherine, with the absolute innocence of small children. "I saw him looking at you, and he had that face." Amelia laughed, her cheeks flushing. "What face, Catherine?" "The face Pa had when he looked at Ma before she got sick," the girl explained, and there was sadness in her voice, but also something else. It was a happy face. Amelia felt her eyes sting. She pulled both children into a tight hug. "You two are very smart, you know that? Too smart for your own good." So it was true that he liked her. Amelia was afraid she was imagining it, seeing things she wanted to see. But if even the children noticed, then it was real. Arthur Sterling, the sternest farmer in the region, was falling in love with her, and she, against all her defenses and fears, was falling in love with him. May turned to June, and the love between them grew at its own pace, neither rushed nor stagnant. One afternoon, Arthur invited her to ride to the edge of the estate to see the sunset. Amelia had never ridden much, but he brought the gentlest mare and helped her mount, firm hands on her waist, making her tremble. They rode in comfortable silence to a high point where the full extent of the fields could be seen, and beyond them, the bluish mountains on the horizon. The sun set in an explosion of oranges and reds and purples. "It is the most beautiful view I have ever seen," whispered Amelia. Arthur looked at her, not at the horizon. "I think so too," he said with a soft voice. Amelia turned her head and realized he wasn't looking at the landscape. He was looking at her. Her heart raced. "Arthur," she began, but didn't know how to continue. He dismounted and helped her down, too. They stood very close to each other, the horses grazing quietly nearby. "Amelia, I need to tell you something," he spoke, and there was vulnerability in his voice she had never heard before. "You can say it," she encouraged. "I thought I had died along with Helen that night. I thought the part of me capable of feeling, of loving, of wanting a future, had been buried with her. I spent 7 years just existing, just fulfilling obligations," he confessed, his hands finding hers naturally. "And then you arrived, with your sadness and your strength, and slowly you brought me back. I don't know how to thank you for that." "You don't need to thank me. You did the same for me," said Amelia, eyes shining. "I was so tired of carrying the weight alone, was so tired of pretending I was fine when I wasn't. With you, I don't need to pretend. I can just be." Arthur pulled her closer, forehead resting against hers. "I don't know what the future holds. I don't know how we make this work with the differences between us, with the memories we carry. But I know I want to try. I want to see where this goes. Do you want that too?" "I do," whispered Amelia. "I want it very much." They stayed like that, embraced, while the sun finished setting and the first stars began to appear. Arthur kissed her forehead, a tender and promising gesture. It wasn't a kiss on the lips yet, it wasn't a full declaration yet, but it was a commitment. It was a promise that they were building something together, one step at a time. But then, 3 days after that perfect moment, the threat arrived. It was late morning when the elegant carriage came up the estate road, a black carriage pulled by two horses, expensive leather upholstery, a sign of considerable wealth. Arthur was in the fields and didn't see the arrival. Amelia was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard the sound of wheels in the courtyard. She wiped her hands on her apron and went to the door. Mrs. Gable was already there, watching a man step down from the carriage. He was about 50, short but corpulent, expensive clothes, thick gold chain on his vest, a ring on every finger. Thinning hair combed with pomade, a thick moustache very well groomed, small eyes that examined everything with an air of ownership. Amelia felt the blood freeze in her veins. She knew that man, Jasper Thorne, uncle of Jacob, her late husband, wealthy merchant, mine owner, a man who had always looked at her in a way that made her feel dirty. Jasper saw her at the door, and his face lit up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Amelia, my dear niece, finally found you," he exclaimed, walking toward her with open arms, as if they were close and loving relatives. Amelia recoiled instinctively. "Mr. Thorne, what are you doing here?" she asked with a tense voice. He stopped, smile becoming slightly harder. "Why, I came to collect what is mine, or rather, came to collect what is owed to me. You didn't think you could simply disappear after everything, did you?" Mrs. Gable stepped to Amelia's side, a protective presence. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" Jasper ignored her completely, eyes fixed on Amelia. "Your husband, my dear nephew Jacob, had considerable debts with me when he died. $3,000 to be exact. You, as his widow, inherited those debts. I am here to collect." Amelia felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. "What debts? Jacob never spoke to me of any debt to you. Because my nephew was too proud to admit he borrowed money from his uncle. But I have the papers, all signed and witnessed." He pulled documents from the inner pocket of his coat, waving them in the air. $3,000, Amelia. It is a lot of money. It will take you years to pay if you start now." "I don't have that money. I lost everything in the flood. I have nothing," she said, voice starting to tremble. Jasper's smile became predatory. "Ah, but you do. You have your hand in marriage. Marry me, and the debt is settled. In fact, it would be generous of me. A widow with 2 children to raise, no assets, no family. I would offer a home, comfort, security." Amelia felt nausea rise in her throat. "Never. I prefer to starve for the rest of my life." Jasper shrugged, but there was cold anger in his eyes. "Then you go to debtor's prison, and the children go to the orphanage again. Is that what you want?" It was at that moment Arthur arrived, having been alerted by one of the workers about the unknown carriage. He entered the courtyard with long strides, immediate and imposing presence. "Who are you, and what are you doing on my farm?" he asked with a voice that would make brave men retreat. Jasper turned, evaluating. "Ah, the owner of the estate, I presume. Jasper Thorne, merchant, came to discuss a personal matter with my niece here." Arthur looked at Amelia and saw the panic in her eyes, saw how she was pale and trembling. Something inside him roared, protective and furious. "Amelia is not your niece. Her husband died 3 years ago. Family ties end there." "But financial ties do not end," countered Jasper, showing the papers. "She owes me $3,000. I came to collect." Arthur took the papers from his hands without asking permission and examined them. They were apparently legitimate documents, signed by Jacob Brooks, witnessed by a notary. Debt contracted over 2 years, compound interest making the value grow. But Arthur had dealt with dishonest men before. He knew how to recognize fraud. "These papers are too convenient. They appear 3 years after the original debtor's death, exactly when you discover where the widow is." "Smells like forgery to me," Arthur said, handing the documents back with disdain. Jasper turned red with anger. "How dare you question my integrity? These papers are legitimate and you have no authority on the matter. It is a problem between me and her." Everything that happens on this estate is my problem, and Amelia is under my protection. If you have a real claim, seek the courts, but don't come here threatening her. The gate is right there," spoke Arthur, pointing, voice low and dangerous. Jasper realized he wasn't going to win that confrontation. Not there, not now. But he wasn't a man to give up easily. "Very well. I will go the legal route then. But just so you know, in debt matters, justice always sides with the creditor." He turned to Amelia. "You will still be mine, dear, one way or another." And he looked at her in a way so possessive and disgusting that Amelia felt like vomiting. Arthur took a step forward, placing himself between Jasper and Amelia. "Get off my property now before I throw you out by force." Jasper smiled, but it was a snake's smile. "We will see each other soon." And he climbed into the carriage, ordering the driver to leave. When the carriage disappeared down the road, Amelia began to shake uncontrollably. Her legs failed, and she would have fallen if Arthur hadn't caught her immediately, pulling her against his chest. "It's okay. I'm here. It's okay," he repeated while guiding her inside the house. He sat her in the chair in the living room, knelt in front of her. Mrs. Gable brought sugar water for the shock. Amelia drank with trembling hands, trying to regain control. "I didn't know about those debts," she whispered. "I swear I didn't know. Jacob never told me anything about money. He kept me in the dark about everything." "I know. I believe you," said Arthur, holding her hands. "And even if the debts were real, you are not responsible for them. A widow does not inherit her husband's debt unless she signed as a guarantor." "But he has papers. He said he's going to the courts," said Amelia with a desperate voice. "What if he succeeds? What if I'm arrested and the children?" Arthur squeezed her hands firmly. "Listen to what I am going to tell you. I won't let anything happen to you. I won't let that man force you into anything. I'm going to call my lawyer. We are going to investigate those papers, and we are going to prove they are fake. And even if we can't prove it, I will pay the debt." Amelia widened her eyes. "Arthur, no. It's $3,000. It's a fortune. I can't accept that." "I am not asking permission," he said with that authority that admitted no discussion. "You are important to me, Amelia, very important, and I protect what is mine." The way he said that, possessive not of control but of care, made Amelia's heart race even amidst the panic. She looked into his eyes and saw absolute truth. He would fight for her. He would protect her. He wouldn't let Jasper win. "But I don't want to be a burden," she whispered. "I already brought the children here, already depend on your employment, on your roof. If you pay my debt on top of that—" "You are not a burden. You are the best thing that has happened in this house in 7 years, interrupted Arthur. "And if you haven't realized yet, I am not doing this just as a generous employer. I am doing it because—" He hesitated, vulnerability clear on his face. "Because I am falling in love with you. Maybe I'm already completely in love. I don't know. I just know that the idea of losing you, of seeing that man take you, drives me mad." Tears streamed down Amelia's face, but they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of relief, of emotion, of unrequited love. "I am falling in love with you too," she confessed. "I'm afraid of it. Afraid of giving myself and being destroyed again, but I can't stop." Arthur pulled her into a tight hug. "I won't hurt you. I'm not like him. I'm not like Jacob. I will take care of you. I will protect you and the children. That is a promise." They stayed embraced for a long time, Mrs. Gable discreetly retiring to give them privacy. When they finally separated, Amelia felt stronger. She wasn't alone. She had Arthur by her side, and together they would face whatever came. But both knew Jasper Thorne was not a man to give up easily. The threat was far from over. It was just the beginning of a battle that would test the strength of the love growing between them. In the days following Jasper Thorne's threatening visit, Stirling Manor lived in a state of controlled tension. Arthur sent for his lawyer, Mr. Evaristo Campos, let's adapt, Mr. Everton Clark, a serious and competent man from Charlottesville who had handled the estate's legal affairs for years. Mr. Clark arrived 3 days later, examined the documents Jasper had left a copy of, and shook his head with a grave expression. The papers seem legitimate at first glance. Signature matches other documents of Jacob Brooks that I managed to locate at the courthouse. The notary who witnessed exists and confirms the registry. But there is something strange, he explained while examining them in the light. The dates don't make complete sense. According to these documents, Jacob borrowed $1,500 in January 1904 and another $1,500 in June of the same year. But the interest applied is abusive, tripled the value in just 3 years. Amelia was sitting in the room with Arthur, listening to everything with a tight heart. Jacob never mentioned debts. He was too proud. If he owed that much money, he would have done something desperate, I would have noticed. The lawyer agreed. It is possible the loans happened, but the interest was inflated after the debtor died. It is common practice among dishonest creditors. They exploit the widow's vulnerability. He looked at Arthur. I can contest in court, but it will take time. Months, maybe more than a year. And in the meantime, Jasper can try other pressure tactics. What kind of tactics? Asked Arthur with a dangerously low voice. He can try to defame her reputation in the village, can try to bribe local authorities to apply pressure, can even try... The lawyer hesitated, looking at Amelia with embarrassment. More direct tactics of intimidation. Arthur stood up, anger evident in his rigid posture. He won't get near her. I will ensure that personally. And he did exactly that. He instructed all the farmhands to be alert for any strangers prowling the property, hired 2 extra men specifically to guard the access points. When Amelia needed to go to the village for supplies, Arthur accompanied her personally or sent Mrs. Gable along with 2 armed workers. The children sensed something was wrong. Richard, observant as always, asked one night while Amelia was tucking them in, Auntie, is that man who came here dangerous? Amelia chose her words carefully. He is someone from the past who is trying to cause trouble. But Mr. Arthur is taking care of everything. You are safe here. Catherine hugged her pillow tightly. I like living here, Auntie. I don't want to leave. And we won't, my love. This is our home now, promised Amelia, kissing her niece's forehead. But inside, she wasn't so sure. Jasper was a rich and influential man. He had connections. If he really wanted to destroy her, he had the resources to do it. And the last thing Amelia wanted was to bring more trouble to Arthur, who had already done so much for her. That same night, unable to sleep, Amelia went down to the kitchen. She lit the lamp and began preparing bread dough, an activity that always calmed her mind. She was so concentrated on the work, she didn't hear Arthur enter. Can't sleep either? He asked, voice soft in the darkness. Amelia turned, bringing a hand to her chest. You scared me. I thought you were sleeping. Arthur approached, watching her hands working the dough with firm and rhythmic movements. I can't shut my mind off. I keep thinking of all the ways that man can try to hurt you and how I can stop each one of them. Amelia stopped working, looking at him with watery eyes. Arthur, you have already done too much. I can't let you risk more for my sake. Maybe I should simply leave, disappear to another place where he won't find me. Arthur's reaction was immediate and visceral. He grabbed her arms, flour staining his shirt, but without caring. No, you are not running away. You won't hide for the rest of your life, and mainly, you won't leave me. His voice had an intensity that made Amelia's heart race. But I am bringing trouble to your life. You were in peace before I arrived, she argued weakly. I wasn't in peace. I was dead inside, corrected Arthur. "You brought me back to life, Amelia. For the first time in 7 years, I want to wake up in the morning. I want to see what the day will bring. I want to have a future. All this because of you. So don't come to me with this story of leaving." He pulled her closer, eliminating the space between them. His hands went up to hold her face carefully, thumbs wiping the tears that began to fall. "I will fix this. I will protect you. And when all this is over, He hesitated, vulnerability clear in his eyes. "I want you to stay with me, not as a cook, as my wife." Amelia held her breath. "Arthur, are you sure? Are you not feeling obligated because of the situation?" "Obligated? Amelia, I'm asking you to marry me because I cannot imagine my life without you, because you made me believe it is possible to love again without betraying the memory of those we lost. Because when I look at you, I see a future, I see hope, I see everything I thought I had lost forever," he confessed with a choked voice. Amelia's tears were now of joy mixed with fear. "I love you too. I'm scared of it, scared of giving myself and being destroyed again, but I love you so much it hurts." "Then marry me," asked Arthur, forehead resting on hers. "Not now, not in the middle of this mess. But when we resolve this, when Jasper is gone and our life is at peace, marry me. Let me take care of you and the children. Let me make you happy for the rest of your life." Amelia closed her eyes, allowing herself to believe in that promise. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." "Jazz," Arthur kissed her then, finally, after weeks of accumulated tension. It was a soft kiss at first, almost hesitant, as if both were relearning how to do that. But quickly it deepened, weeks of contained desire manifesting, his hands on her waist, pulling her against his strong body, her hands going up his broad shoulders to his hair, fingers interlacing in the dark strands. It was a kiss of promise, of commitment, of true love, found when both had lost hope. When they separated, both were breathless. Arthur rested his forehead on hers again, smiling in a way that lit up his whole face. 7 years, he whispered. 7 years feeling nothing. And now I feel everything. Amelia smiled too, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. "We will beat this together. I won't let Jasper destroy what we are building." And they wouldn't. But the battle was just beginning. 2 weeks later, Jasper attacked in another way. Rumors began to circulate through the village. They said Amelia had been her husband's uncle's lover before becoming a widow. They said she had fled the Shenandoah Valley after stealing money. They said the children weren't even her niece and nephew, but illegitimate children. Cruel lies designed to destroy her reputation and force her to yield to his demands. Amelia heard the whispers when she went to the village with Mrs. Gable to buy fabric. She saw how some women stepped away from her, how conversations stopped when she passed, how looks of judgment followed her. She returned to the farm with a broken heart, silent tears streaming down her face during the entire wagon ride back. Arthur realized immediately when she arrived. "What happened?" he demanded to know. Amelia told him about the rumors, about how people who barely knew her had already judged and condemned her. "He is destroying my reputation, Arthur. No one will believe me. Everyone will think I am a woman of no character." Arthur's fury was palpable, but he contained it for love of her. "Tomorrow I go to the village. I will speak with Reverend Thomas, with the justice of the peace, with everyone I need to. They will know the truth." And he did exactly that. The next day, Arthur rode to the village and went straight to the church. Reverend Thomas received him with concern. He had heard the rumors too. Arthur told the complete truth about Jasper, about the fake debts, about the intimidation tactics. The Reverend listened to everything attentively, then shook his head with indignation. "Jasper Thorne has always been a man of questionable morals. I will use my Sunday sermon to speak about false witness and rash judgment. I won't mention names, but people will understand." Arthur thanked him and went to the records office, where the local clerk, Mr. Oliver, kept the region's records. He found marriage and death records of Jacob Brooks, confirming Amelia's story. He asked for certified copies of everything. Then he went to the house of the Justice of the Peace, Judge Bernard, a fair man who had known Arthur since he was a boy. He exposed the complete situation to the judge. Judge Bernard examined the debt documents with growing skepticism. These interest rates are illegal. The law establishes a maximum limit. Here they are charging more than 100%. This is usury, and usury is a crime. He looked at Arthur seriously. I will issue a warrant for investigation. If we prove Jasper Thorne is using fraudulent documents for extortion, he goes to prison. Arthur left the judge's house with renewed hope. Justice was slow, but at least it was on their side. He returned to the farm at dusk, found Amelia in the kitchen preparing dinner. She turned upon hearing him enter, and he went straight to her, pulling her into a tight hug. The judge is on our side. Reverend Thomas will clear up the rumors in Sunday's sermon. We are winning this battle, he said against her hair. Amelia allowed herself to believe, allowed herself to relax in his arms for the first time in days. Thank you for everything you are doing. Don't thank me. You would do the same for me, he replied, and it was absolute truth. That night, after the children slept, after Mrs. Gable retired, Arthur and Amelia sat on the porch under the stars. He had brought 2 cups of coffee, and they sat there in comfortable silence, just appreciating each other's presence. Tell me more about Helen, asked Amelia suddenly. I want to know the woman who had your heart before me. Arthur was surprised by the request, but there was genuine sincerity in the way she asked. It wasn't jealousy, it was a desire to understand. Helen was different from you in many ways. More extroverted, more expansive. She lit up any place she entered with laughter and stories, he began, looking at the stars as if he saw the past written in them. But in other ways, you two are alike. The strength, the kindness, the way you care for people. She would have liked you, I think. Amelia smiled softly. I hope so. I hope she approves that I am here. Arthur took her hand, interlacing fingers. For a long time I thought loving another person would be betraying her. But Reverend Thomas told me something that stayed with me. He said the heart doesn't have limited capacity, that loving someone new doesn't diminish the love we feel for those we lost. It just expands our capacity to love. He looked into Amelia's eyes. I loved Helen with everything I had, and now I love you the same way. It's not less. It's not a competition. It is simply true love happening twice in one life, and that is a rare gift. Tears streamed freely down Amelia's face now. No one had ever said something so beautiful to her. I love you too, Arthur. I love everything about you. Your strength, your hidden kindness, the way you care for the children without fanfare, how you make me feel safe for the first time in my life. They kissed again, long and slow, without rushing. It was a kiss of promise, of a future being built. When they separated, Arthur had clear decision in his eyes. I'm not going to wait for Jasper to take the next step. I'm going to him, and we're going to settle this once and for all. Amelia tensed. Arthur, no, he is dangerous. For that very reason, I won't leave this threat hovering over us indefinitely. I will find him. I will pay what is fair of the debt, if there is a real debt, and I will make it clear that if he comes near you again, there will be consequences. His voice had absolute determination. Let me go with you, asked Amelia. No, this is between me and him now. You stay here, safe with the children. Trust me, asked Arthur. Amelia didn't like it, but she knew that when he made a decision like that, there was no changing his mind. All right, but promise you come back to me. I promise, he said, sealing the pledge with another kiss. 2 days later, Arthur rode to Roanoke, where Jasper had business. He took with him two of his most trusted workers, strong and loyal men who wouldn't hesitate to defend him if necessary. He also took the certified copies of the documents, the lawyer's opinion, and a bag with $3,000, the total value of the alleged debt. He found Jasper in his office, an opulent room full of expensive furniture and symbols of wealth. The man stood up when Arthur entered, a fake smile forming on his lips. Ah, the gentleman farmer finally came to accept that. Arthur threw the bag of money on the table, interrupting. $3,000. The total value you claim is owed. I am paying, not because I believe the debt is real, but to end this matter once and for all. Jasper took the bag, feeling the weight of the money, but the smile didn't waver. How generous. But you see, there are accumulated interest from the time since I began looking for her. That adds another $1,000 to the total. Arthur leaned over the table, voice low and dangerous. You will accept that money, and you will vanish from her life. Or I hand over all this evidence, he pointed to the documents he had brought, to the judge, and you will be investigated for usury and extortion. And when the investigation begins, I am certain they will find many other irregularities in your business. Men like you always have skeletons hidden. Jasper's smile finally disappeared. Are you threatening me? I am making a promise. Leave Amelia alone. Stop spreading lies about her, and you keep the money and your freedom. Continue with these tactics, and I guarantee that by the end of the year you are in prison, and your businesses are ruined. I have resources, I have connections, and I have motivation. Do not test me. Arthur's natural authority, that presence that made men bow, was in full effect. Jasper evaluated the situation. He could see Arthur wasn't bluffing. And $3,000, though not what he really wanted, which was Amelia in a forced marriage to access what remained of her family inheritance, was still a considerable sum. Besides, if a judge really investigated his books, he would find many questionable practices. All right, he conceded finally, taking the money. We consider the debt settled, and I have no further interest in my niece. Put that in writing, demanded Arthur, pushing paper and pen across the table. Write that the debt is settled, that you have no further claims against Amelia Brooks, and sign in front of witnesses. Jasper grumbled, but did what was asked, knowing he had lost that battle. He wrote the document, signed it, and Arthur called his two men to witness. He took the paper, stored it carefully, and turned to leave. If I find out you came near her again, that you spread more lies, that you tried anything, I come back here, and next time I don't come with money. I come to make you pay in other ways. Understood? Jasper nodded, impotent rage burning in his eyes. Understood perfectly. Arthur left the office with the document that freed Amelia, with the satisfaction of having won that war without physical violence, but with strength of character and well-used resources. He rode back home with a light heart, anxious to give her the news. He arrived at the farm late in the afternoon the next day. Amelia was in the kitchen with the children, teaching Richard to make cookies, while Catherine played with bread dough. When she heard the horse's hooves, she dropped everything and ran to the courtyard. If you like this story so far and want to see the emotional ending, leave your like now and share with someone who loves stories of true love. Arthur dismounted, and before he could say anything, Amelia threw herself into his arms. He held her tight, spinning her in the air, laughing with genuine joy he hadn't felt in too long. It's over. Everything is resolved. He won't bother you ever again, he announced, showing the document. Amelia read the words with wide eyes, tears of relief streaming down. Is it really over? For real? For real. You are free, Amelia. Free to live. Free to be happy. Free to be my wife if you still want to, he said, holding her face between his hands. I still want to. I want it more than anything, she replied, and kissed him right there in the middle of the courtyard, not caring who might see. The children came running from the kitchen, having heard the commotion. Richard and Catherine stopped upon seeing the two adults hugging, and huge smiles formed on their faces. "Is Auntie Amelia going to marry Mr. Arthur?" asked Catherine with pure childish excitement. Arthur lowered himself to the children's level, Amelia by his side. "I am. If you two approve, because it's not just her I'm asking to marry, it's you too. I want you to be my family." He looked at Richard. "Do you think you can put up with me as an uncle?" Richard, who had been so quiet and scared when he arrived, smiled broadly. "I can, sir. You are nice." "And you, little one?" asked Arthur to Catherine. "Do you want to live here forever with Auntie Amelia and me?" "I do," exclaimed the girl, throwing herself into his arms with a confidence she didn't have when she arrived. "And can I call you Uncle Arthur?" Arthur felt his chest tighten with emotion. "Yes, you can. It would be an honor." Mrs. Gable watched everything from the porch, wiping tears of happiness with her apron. The house that had been a silent tomb for 7 years was finally being reborn. It had the noise of children. It had laughter. It had love. Helen would have approved. She was certain of that. Preparations for the wedding began immediately. Reverend Thomas was delighted with the news, insisting he would perform the ceremony personally. Mrs. Gable took on the mission of helping Amelia choose fabric for the wedding dress, a task she executed with maternal enthusiasm. The news spread through the village quickly, and the malicious rumors Jasper had spread were replaced by a much more beautiful story. The sternest farmer in the region, the man no one thought would love again, had found happiness anew. It was a story of redemption, of second chances, the kind people love to tell and retell. The wedding was set for a month later, enough time to prepare everything, but not so long that the anxiety became unbearable. Arthur completely renovated the room that would be theirs, put in new furniture, ordered fine fabrics from Richmond. He transformed one of the large rooms into a room for the children, with 2 nice beds, a spacious dresser, even a soft rug on the floor. Richard and Catherine were flourishing. Richard had started at the village school and showed sharp intelligence, especially in math. Catherine, younger, spent days helping Amelia in the kitchen, playing in the yard with the chickens, telling stories to the calves. The sadness of losing their mother was still there, always would be, but it was being softened by the love and security they found on the farm. A week before the wedding, Arthur took Amelia again to that high point where they had seen the sunset months ago. This time he had prepared a surprise. He had ordered a small gazebo built at the site, a simple wooden structure with a bench protected by a thatched roof facing the view of the mountains. When Amelia saw it, she brought her hands to her mouth. "Arthur, what is this?" "It is our place," he explained, helping her dismount. "I thought we needed a space just for us, where we can come when life gets too heavy, when we need to remember what we conquered together." He pointed to a carved wooden plaque nailed to the gazebo. It had their names and the date, Arthur and Amelia, 1908, where everything began again. Amelia wept with emotion, hugging him tightly. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "I'm not perfect. I'm a man full of flaws who had absurd luck that you appeared in my life," he corrected, kissing her forehead. "But I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already deserve me." "You deserve all the happiness in the world," she said, and kissed him while the sun set in an explosion of colors behind the mountains. The wedding day dawned sunny and warm, typical of July in Virginia. The small village church was decorated with wildflowers the village women had gathered and arranged with care. Practically the entire population attended, wanting to witness that historic moment. Amelia walked down the aisle, arm in arm, with Mr. Clark, the lawyer who had agreed to give her away in the absence of family. The dress was simple, of white cotton, with delicate lace details Mrs. Gable had embroidered personally. Her loose hair fell in waves down her back, wildflowers interwoven forming a natural crown. Arthur was at the altar waiting, and when he saw her enter, his eyes filled with tears. He didn't try to hide. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, not for the clothes or adornments, but for the light radiating from within. It was pure happiness manifesting physically. Reverend Thomas conducted the ceremony with an emotional voice. He spoke about second chances, about how true love can happen more than once in a life, about how the pain of the past need not define the future. When it came time for vows, Arthur held Amelia's hands and spoke with a firm voice. "Amelia, when you arrived in my life, I was dead inside. I had forgotten what it was like to feel joy, what it was like to have hope. You brought me back, with your silent strength and your generous heart. I promise to spend every day of the rest of my life making you happy, protecting you and the children, building the beautiful future we both deserve. I love you more than I thought possible to love again. You are my new beginning, my redemption, my happiness, and I am yours forever." Amelia wiped the tears streaming freely, holding his hands tightly. "Arthur, you showed me it is possible to trust again after being hurt, showed me that kindness and strength can exist in the same person. You gave me a home when I had nothing, gave me security when I was afraid, gave me love when I thought I would never be loved again. I promise to walk by your side for the rest of my life in easy days and hard ones, loving you with everything I am. You are my safe harbor, my true love, my home." There wasn't a dry eye in the church. The words were simple, but charged with truth so deep it touched everyone. Reverend Thomas smiled while pronouncing the final blessings. "By the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Arthur, you may kiss your bride." And Arthur kissed her, long and deep, not caring about the audience. It was a kiss of fulfilled promise, of guaranteed future, of love that had overcome pain, fear, and threats to finally bloom complete. When they separated, both were radiant, and the church exploded in applause and celebrations. Richard and Catherine, sitting in the front row with Mrs. Gable, ran to hug the two. "Now we are a real family," exclaimed Catherine with pure childish joy. "We always were, little one," said Arthur, picking her up. "But now it's official." The party happened in the farm courtyard, which had been transformed for the occasion. Long tables with white cloths, abundant food the village women had helped prepare, fiddle and accordion music played by local musicians. There was laughter, dancing, stories being told and retold. Arthur and Amelia danced the first dance, moving clumsily to the music, tripping over each other's feet, laughing like teenagers in love. "We weren't good dancers, even before everything," joked Arthur. "Then we are perfectly matched," replied Amelia, resting her head on his chest. Mrs. Gable watched everything with maternal satisfaction. She approached Reverend Thomas, who also watched the couple with a smile. "She would have approved," said the housekeeper. "Helen would have approved completely." The Reverend nodded. "The best love stories aren't those without pain. They are those where pain was overcome, where two broken people found healing in each other. That is what makes their love so special." The party lasted until late at night, and when finally the guests began to leave, saying goodbye with blessings and wishes for happiness, Arthur and Amelia were left alone in the courtyard, lit by lanterns. The children had already been taken to sleep by Mrs. Gable. "Mrs. Sterling," said Arthur, testing the name. "How does that sound?" Amelia smiled, that luminous smile that had the power to light up her whole face. "Sounds like home. Sounds like happiness. Sounds like everything I always wanted but didn't know I could have." He picked her up, making her squeal with surprise and laugh. "Arthur, what are you doing?" "Carrying my wife over the threshold as tradition demands," he explained, walking toward the main house. "But we've walked in and out of that door 1,000 times. But not as husband and wife. Today is different. Today is the first day of the rest of our lives," he said with a seriousness that contrasted with the romantic gesture. Amelia hugged his neck, kissing his jaw. I love you so much, Arthur Sterling, so much it sometimes scares me. I love you too, and you never need to be afraid again. I'm here, I'm always going to be here, he promised, crossing the threshold and entering the house that was now truly theirs. The months that followed were of sweet adaptation to the new life. Amelia was no longer the cook, she was the lady of the estate, though she insisted on continuing to cook because she loved it. Arthur hired another girl from the village to help with the heavier work, but the kitchen remained Amelia's domain. She also took on other responsibilities, helping Arthur with administration, dealing with suppliers, organizing the house. She discovered she had a natural talent for numbers and management, skills Jacob had never let her develop. Arthur, on the contrary, valued her opinions and frequently asked for her advice on important decisions. The children prospered. Richard showed more and more interest in farm work, following Arthur through the fields, asking endless questions about planting, harvesting, management. Arthur had infinite patience with the boy, teaching everything he knew, treating him like the son he never had. Catherine became Amelia's shadow, helping in the kitchen, learning recipes, filling the house with cheerful chatter that contrasted beautifully with the years of silence. The girl had also adopted the orange cat from the stables, which now slept at the foot of her bed every night. A year after the wedding, in July 1909, Arthur and Amelia did something symbolic and important. They went together to the estate cemetery, to Helen's grave. Amelia carried fresh flowers, and the two stood there, hands held. "Helen," began Arthur with a soft voice, "I want to introduce my wife. She is an incredible woman, strong, kind, everything you would have liked in a friend. And I want to say thank you. Thank you for the time we had together, for the love we shared, for teaching me what true love is. That love allowed me to recognize when I found it again." He looked at Amelia. "She knows you will always have a special place in my heart, and isn't jealous of it, because our love is big enough to honor the past while we build the future." Amelia placed the flowers on the grave carefully. "Thank you for loving him so well. Thank you for making him the man he is today. I will take care of him, I promise. And I will keep your memory alive in this house, not with sadness, but with gratitude that you existed." When they left the cemetery, both felt deep peace. There was no more guilt, no more feeling of betrayal. There was only acceptance that life goes on, that love can exist in multiple forms, that honoring those we lost doesn't mean stopping living. Years passed in increasing happiness. The estate prospered under the joint management of Arthur and Amelia. They implemented improvements, treated workers with fairness and generosity, became respected not just for wealth, but for character. Richard grew and at 16 was already working side by side with Arthur as a junior partner of the farm. The shy and frightened boy had become a confident young man, intelligent, hard-working. He called Arthur uncle, but saw him as a father in all the ways that mattered. Catherine became a beautiful and joyful young woman, heir to Amelia's culinary talent and her generous heart. At 14, she already spoke of studying to be a teacher, wanted to teach children, wanted to make a difference in the world. 5 years after the wedding, in 1913, Arthur and Amelia were at the gazebo he had built, watching the sunset as they frequently did. It was their ritual, a sacred moment of connection. "Do you regret anything?" asked Amelia suddenly, head resting on his shoulder. Arthur thought for a moment. "I regret the 7 years I wasted in loneliness, when I could have started living sooner. But then, maybe if I had started sooner, I wouldn't have been ready when you arrived. Maybe we need time in the desert to appreciate the oasis." He kissed the top of her head. "And you? Do you regret?" "Nothing, not even the hard moments, because they all brought me here. To you," she replied. "You know what I realized? The pain doesn't disappear completely. I still miss my sister. I still remember the difficult marriage I had, But now those memories don't define me anymore. They are just part of my story, not the whole story." Arthur held her hand, interlacing fingers. "Exactly. I still love Helen, always will. But that doesn't diminish in any way what I feel for you. They are different loves, in different moments of life, and both are true." They stayed in silence, watching the sky change colors. Amelia broke the silence with a soft voice. "Do you think we'll have this view for the rest of our lives? Do you think love like this, strong and true, lasts forever?" Arthur pulled her closer. "It will last for as long as we choose to make it last. Love isn't just a feeling that happens. It is a choice we make every day, choosing to be present, choosing to listen, choosing to forgive, choosing to begin again when necessary. As long as we keep choosing each other, it will last forever. Then I choose you. Today and all the days to come," said Amelia, turning to kiss him. "And I choose you. Always," he replied against her lips. The sun set completely, painting the sky deep purple, speckled with stars beginning to appear. In the valley below, the lights of Stirling Manor shone warm and welcoming. Smoke rose from the chimneys. Voices of workers returning from the day's labour echoed in the distance. Laughter from Richard and Catherine arrived from somewhere near the house. It was the sound of life, of family, of home. Arthur and Amelia walked down from the gazebo hand in hand, walking slowly along the familiar trail. They were in no rush. They had the rest of their lives. When they reached the house, they found Richard teaching Catherine to play guitar on the porch, a talent he had recently discovered. Mrs. Gable was finishing organizing the table for dinner, humming softly. The orange cat slept curled up on a chair. Everything was common, ordinary, perfectly normal, and it was perfect exactly for that reason. Amelia stopped for a moment before entering, observing the scene. Arthur noticed and asked, "What is it?" "Just storing this moment in memory. I want to remember exactly what happiness looks like," she explained with shining eyes. Arthur hugged her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. "There will be thousands of moments like this. This is just the first of many perfect nights." And he was right. The years continued, bringing their mix of joys and challenges, as life always does. There were bad harvests and excellent harvests. There were illnesses and cures. There were farewells when Mrs. Gable passed away peacefully at 70, and new welcomes when Richard married a girl from the neighboring village and brought her to live on the estate. But through everything, Arthur and Amelia remained united. Their hands sought each other automatically during difficult moments. Their eyes met across crowded rooms, silent conversations no one else understood. Their laughter mingled during family dinners that became louder and more chaotic as the family grew. Catherine eventually became a teacher as she dreamed, opening a small school in the village where she taught the workers' children. Richard took on more and more farm responsibilities, allowing Arthur to slow his pace, something he accepted with surprise that he didn't mind aging when he had such good company. 10 years after the wedding in 1918, Arthur woke early as always, but this time didn't go out immediately to work. He stayed lying there watching Amelia sleep, hair spread on the pillow, breath soft and regular, peaceful expression on her face. She had some wrinkles now, marks of laughing a lot and living fully. He had more grey hair, body not as strong as it used to be, but it didn't matter. They were marks of a shared life, of time spent with the right person. Amelia opened her eyes slowly, finding him watching. "Good morning," she whispered with a sleep-rough voice. "Good morning, love of my life," he replied, kissing her forehead. "Why are you awake? It's still dark outside." "Just thinking about how lucky I am. How my life could have been so different if you hadn't appeared that March afternoon 10 years ago," he confessed. Amelia snuggled closer. "It wasn't luck. It was destiny. We were destined to meet, to save each other." "Do you believe in that? In destiny?" he asked. I believe some people are born to find each other, that the universe conspires to bring together souls that complement one another, and me and you, we are like that. Two halves that were lost until they found each other, she said with conviction. Arthur held her tighter. Then I am grateful to destiny, to the universe, to God, to any force that brought you to me, because you didn't just save me from loneliness, you saved me from myself. And you saved me from fear, taught me it is possible to trust, possible to be happy, possible to love without losing oneself in the process, replied Amelia. They stayed like that until the sun began to rise, illuminating the room through the lace curtains. They heard the sounds of the farm waking up, roosters crowing, cows being led to milking, voices of workers starting the day. It was a familiar symphony that had cradled their mornings for a decade. Eventually they got up, started one more day. But it was a day imbued with deep gratitude for everything they had built together. It wasn't a perfect life, because a perfect life doesn't exist, but it was a life full of true love, and that was more than enough. Years later, when both were already elderly, hair completely grey, bodies marked by time but spirits still vibrant, they returned to the gazebo. It was a bit worn by weather, the wood needing repairs, but still solid. Richard had offered to build a new, nicer one, but Arthur refused. He liked this one exactly as it was, loaded with memories. They sat on the bench, looking at the view they had contemplated hundreds of times. The mountains were the same, the fields still extended as far as the eye could see, the sky still painted masterpieces at dusk, but they had changed. They were wiser, more tired, more complete. It was worth it, said Amelia suddenly. Everything. The pain that brought us here, the challenges we faced, the fears we overcame. It was worth every moment because it brought us this life. Arthur kissed her wrinkled hand, a gesture he had done 1,000 times, but never lost its meaning. You were the best thing that happened to me, better even than I deserved. Don't say that. You deserve all the love in the world, she protested. Then I'm lucky to have found everything I deserved in you, he replied. The sun set in golden glory, the day's last performance. And while the colours exploded on the horizon, Arthur and Amelia remained there, hands interlaced, shoulders touching, hearts beating in sync. They were survivors of devastating losses, of deep pains, of paralyzing fears. But more than survivors, they were victors. They had conquered loneliness with company, fear with courage, despair with hope. They had proved that true love knows no age, knows no social barriers, is not diminished by past loves. That it is possible to love deeply more than once in a life, that scars do not prevent new beginnings, that the human heart has infinite capacity to start over when it finds the right person. The story of Arthur and Amelia became legend in the region. People told children and grandchildren about the stern farmer who had been reborn through the love of a resilient woman, about how two broken hearts had healed each other, about how true love sometimes comes disguised as a second chance. And when both finally departed, many years after that golden afternoon at the gazebo, they departed together, with a difference of only a few months. They were buried side by side in the small estate cemetery, not far from where Helen rested under the willow tree. And there was no sadness in that, because they had lived fully, loved completely, and left a legacy of hope for all who knew their story. Their love proved something fundamental, that it is never too late to start over, that the pain of the past need not define the future, that shared vulnerability creates stronger connections than protective walls. Arthur had let Amelia weep on his shoulder that distant April afternoon, and in that simple gesture of allowing himself to be vulnerable, of offering comfort when he himself was still learning to feel again, he had planted the seed of the most beautiful love he had ever known, and Amelia, in accepting that comfort, in allowing herself to trust that stern man who hid deep goodness under layers of protection, had found not just a home for her and the children, but a true partner, true love, a life she never imagined possible. This was the most beautiful love story between the stern widower farmer and the only woman he let cry on his shoulder. It was a story of mutual healing, of second chances, of love that transcends pain and fear to bloom into something eternal. And on quiet nights, when the wind blows softly through the fields of Sterling Manor, they say one can still hear echoes of laughter, whispers of love, sounds of a life lived fully, because true love never really dies. It just transforms, becoming part of the earth, of memory, of the hope of all who seek their own second chance.